welcome to episode 83 of Formidable Opponents, a show that pits three people who have known each other virtually their entire lives in a series of conversations as we argue what is best in a variety of fun, engaging, and critical pop culture topics we all debate about. I'm Randall, and with me as always Bob and Joseph, and today we're joined by our special guest, Jiovanna, and this week's topic is Best Supporting Character on The Simpsons. I'd like to start off by saying, hello, this is Mole Man in the Morning. Good Mole Man to you. Today, part 4 of our series of the agonizing pain in which I live every day. This week, we are talking Simpsons, the longest-running American sitcom in history. These popular characters and their many quirks and traits have endeared themselves to us spanning 5 decades. The show centered around the titular family. Homer, the bumbling but good-natured father. Marge, with her signature blue beehive hairdo, a symbol of maternal strength and unconditional love. Bart, the mischievous troublemaker. Lisa, the overachieving perfectionist. And Maggie, who may not talk yet, but her battles with a unibrowed arch-rival, Baby Gerald, are always entertaining. However, on this episode, we will be focusing on the secondary characters that made the remarkable appearances and became fan favorites that we all know and love. We're talking about the supporting cast that has always been a part of the show's journey from the very beginning. The Simpsons has made a lasting effect on pop culture, and it is their success in creating hilarious supporting characters that has helped keep fans engaged for over 30 years. So, whether you're an old man who yells at clouds, a divorced father who sleeps in a race car bed, or a cynical chain-smoking sister-in-law, this week's episode is for you, as this week Formidable Opponents debates and discusses Best Supporting Simpsons Character. As always, I'm joined by two guys whom you may remember from such podcasts as The Erotic Adventures of Hercules and The Wackiest Covered Wagon in the West. Bob and Joseph, how are you guys doing?
It's been a terrible fucking Sunday, but I'm glad we're here doing this show.
How are you doing?
What's going on? I'm good. I'm relaxed.
Wonderful. Look at that. Big smile. Are you drinking emergency? What's up with you, man?
It's just some juice. I don't want to say what it is.
All right, we'll keep that secret. All right, so this week...
He doesn't want the world to know he drinks mimosas out of a water bottle.
Nothing wrong with that. This week we are joined by a guest. Let's welcome our guest, by the way, who happens to be the third former student worker from a college I last worked at 11 years ago that we have invited to this podcast.
Really, 11 years you had to say it. I am doing well. Just got over a cold. I'm good. How are you?
We're happy to have you on, and we're having you on this show for one reason and one reason only. Your bubbly personality, 2 reasons, and your extensive knowledge on The Simpsons. So before we get to that, I've worked in higher ed since 2004. In 2007, I worked for a college and I was assigned or exiled to one of our satellite campuses to help clean up the place, or as I was told, right, or lied to. I was there for 6 months and I was informed, oh, by the way, you're inheriting a new hire. Figure things out for her to do. So Jiovanna, I met you and I was like, okay, so what am I supposed to do with Gothic Punky Brewster over here? It was like our own sitcom. We bonded over things like music, movies, snow cones that you spilled all over my car. And
I mean,
go ahead.
who buys a vehicle with beige interior? Beige interior. Come on,
they matched his beige pants.
You're asking for disaster at that point, bro. Beige interior.
But most of all, Jiovanna, as you remember fondly, we talked a lot about The Simpsons. Now, before we talk about that, my favorite memory of you is a time you tripped and fell during a dance routine for the college talent show. You remember that? She was embarrassed, folks, and on the verge of tears. What did I do? You remember, Jiovanna. What did I do when you fell down during that dance routine?
You got up and danced the Macarena.
I got up and danced the Macarena, and the DJ started playing the song. I called you over, and you joined in, and the crowd went absolutely apeshit. Not a dry eye in the house. All 13 audience members left happy. So, true story, right?
It's because they all spoke Spanish. They didn't understand what was going on.
The Macarena is in Spanish.
Not the way Randall dances it.
Oh, I see.
So anyway, welcome, Jiovanna. We're very happy to have you here, all kidding aside. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jiovanna.
Well, I've been listening to y'all for a while. So, long time listener, first time, actual
Caller.
Emotional harasser. Yes. Anyway, I'm a writer by trade and education. Got my MFA in creative writing in 2018, and that's what I do. I'm a screenwriter, I'm a editor, proofreader, all that fun stuff, and it's a lot of fun. It doesn't pay the bills, but it's a lot of fun. Doesn't pay the bills yet, I should say, but it's a lot of fun. And if y'all need my services for writing, my writing services, you can reach out to me. But other than that, I'm just a mom and a nerd and a whiskey drinker, connoisseur-ish.
Simpsons.
We're three
I
of the
mean,
four.
that's kind of like a given because I'm here today. So school y'all a little bit.
Speaking of Simpsons, Jiovanna, what inspired your ongoing Simpsons fandom? Tell us a little bit about your history, why you're still into them.
Well, I started watching it as a kid. I didn't grow up with cable, so I would come home and it was like when it was syndicated on NBC, it was 6 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. They'd play 2 episodes back to back, and then at 10 p.m. before bed. So as far back as I can remember, that's what I remember doing. And my parents are both non-English speakers, so they were just like, oh, whatever, she's watching a cartoon. It actually wasn't until many years later that my mom watched it and like dubbed in Spanish, and she was like, this is what you're watching? And I'm like, just kind of staying there. She's like, well, it explains a lot, and then just kind of left it at that, but yeah, but like the Simpsons introduced me to Edgar Allan Poe as a kid. I remember being like 6 and being horrified with the first Treehouse of Horror and like The Raven, and asking all kinds of questions. Like I was scared, but I didn't know why I was scared, but I really enjoyed it. And I got my sister to read me the first few like stories by Edgar Allan Poe that she felt comfortable reading me after that. So, and then as I got older, I started reading them myself. So it's just been kind of like every little thing a lot of the things that I like about pop culture, I learned through The Simpsons or were just kind of like reinforced by The Simpsons.
That first Treehouse of Horrors was pretty scary. I think they kind of covered the poltergeist, and then they did the Edgar Allan Poe thing. I saw it earlier today, so yeah, it was pretty creepy. Yeah. I like that one.
Hungry
I like
the
all
Damned,
of them.
Bad Dream House, and The Raven. And then it was voiced by James Earl Jones. Are you kidding me? Like it was read by James Earl Jones. It was so good.
That's pretty cool. They got him to do that.
Yeah, it was really great.
Did a few of them. He's guest spotted on a lot of their shows.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the world's fascination with The Simpsons, Jiovanna? Why are they so prevalent, so popular for 5 decades running?
For me, it's really comforting. Like going back and watching like seasons 1 through 9 are my all-time favorite. And like it's just comforting for me to go back and watch it and still get the jokes. And a lot of those jokes are still really timely. Like I recently had my boyfriend watch the immigration one with Apu. Much ado about nothing. Yeah. And he was just like, holy crap, that's still the same argument. Like it is still the same argument. This came out in the mid 90s, or like Bart versus Australia, different episodes like that. Like they're still relevant now. Like a lot of the things that they discuss are still relevant now. And
I like Homer crying and smiling because the toilet, flushes the proper American way. You set it up that way. I always thought that was fucking hilarious.
Seeing the Star Spangled Banner and saluting it. Yeah. Like I think a lot of the humor is still relevant now, or a lot of the jokes that they make, a lot of the history that they used, is repeating itself, unfortunately. So we see it reflected there, or we see that it hasn't changed. And for whatever reason, that can be slightly comforting and just kind of like, ugh, All
right, let's open up this question to everybody. What are some of your favorite Simpsons episodes? Giovanna, let's start off with you.
I made a list. I'm going to show y'all. I know.
Don't read those 15 pages.
I'm not going to. But there's 63 favorite episodes in.
Give us 4 or 5.
We'll call it 2. What are your top 2? What are your top 3? What are the ones that speak to you?
Okay, so season 7 by far is my favorite season, according to this. So just because the whole Tarantino thing that we've discussed at nauseum, 22 short films about Springfield is one of my favorites. That's in season 7, season 21 or episode 21. But I also really like in season 3, Radio Bart, in season 2, 2 Cars in Every Garage, 3 Eyes on Every Fish, one of my all-time favorite episodes. Streetcar Named Marge versus a Monorail, the Springfield Files, Lisa the Skeptic, the Joyous Sect.
Pretty funny.
There's just too many. There's too many. The PTA disbands. Lemon of Troy. I just had my boyfriend watch Lemon of Troy. And
it's one of my favorites.
It was Bart of Darkness. Come on. There's just too many good ones. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop there. But Lisa the Iconoclast. I love that one because she and her children and her children's children get banned from the Springfield Jebediah History Museum for 3 months. I love that. And it's Donald Sutherland. How can you not love that? Anyway,
I like how you use the titles because we're going to be all like the one where Homer crashes car, insurance. So we might have to skip our portion. But Bob, what are some of your favorite episodes?
I have two. This is from Treehouse of Horror 5, The Shining, not The Shining, The Shining.
Yes.
You don't get sued.
Twice.
You want to get sued? Yeah. I thought that's I've mentioned it a bunch of times before. The Shining is my favorite horror movie. So the little spoof off of it, I absolutely love and I watch all the time. And then this is, I don't have the title, but it's I want to say it's Baseball Homer, where the
Homer
power
at
plant
bat.
creates a baseball team. Yeah, Homer at bat. So they create the
That's on my
baseball
list.
team, and Mr. Burns finds out, and he's like, well, we got to win. And he hires like Roger Clemens and Wade Boggs and Ken Griffey and Daryl Strawberry to play baseball for him so they can win the softball league or whatever the fuck it is. So I love the...
Who was a guy with a big head? Was that King Griffey Jr.?
It was Ken Griffey because he was eating something that was like I think
was a
like
nerve
poison from the
tonic.
plant. Yeah, nerve
It was a
tonic, and it
nerve-
fucking makes his head huge. Yeah,
Mattingly,
I love that.
Gigantism.
shave your sideburns, Mattingly. And
Yeah, shave your sideburns. Yeah, he fucking makes him shave. Oh yeah, I love that episode. I love that the little jingle at the end. It's one of my favorites. What about you, Joe?
Homer the Great, the Stonecutter, the Secret Society one. I always thought that was real funny. What's King Size Homer? I always thought that was
Yes.
funny as well. The things that he does and that whole scene where he's trying to gain weight and they're like, I forgot what he asks about it. Like, how do we know how much fat it has? And then he rubs the burger on the side of the wall. And there's so much grease you can see through the fucking wall.
That's your window to weight gain.
And Homer Palooza, I thought that was cool because he saw the bands, the bands that made cameos and things like that.
Where
And-
he's getting shot in the stomach with the
yeah, he's
bowling
getting
balls
shot.
and cannonballs?
Yeah, he goes to the show with his kids, and that shit happens. You know, the whole Peter Gabriel thing and the Cypress Hill. Who ordered the London
Yeah,
Silver
that was
harmonic?
Yeah.
Possibly while high. Cypress Hill, I'm looking at you.
My favorite interaction in that episode is, "Hi, Billy Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins, Homer Simpson smiling politely." Like,
Yeah.
just has always killed me. Like,
Yeah.
Which
that was a great
episode was it where he was a pervert? They were like, they're thinking he was a pervert, and he goes outside to talk to him, and his robe like blows up in the wind, and everybody seems real shocked.
that's Homer Badman.
Homer Badman. Okay,
Yeah,
there we
that's
go.
with the gummy Venus de Milo stuck on the babysitter's butt.
Oh yes, when he's stealing the gummy off the babysitter's butt, right? It was stuck to her pants. Yeah,
Yes.
So
yeah, that was a great one.
mine real quick. I think we're gonna just make it a clean sweep. King Size Homer, one of the best episodes. I have Radioactive Man, Lemon of Troy, probably my all-time favorite. We talk about that one all the time. Giovanna, Marge versus the Monorail, written by who? Giovanna?
Conan O'Brien.
Conan O'Brien, yes. And then, of course, the two-part Who Shot Mr. Burns, which made
Oh, yeah, that was
magazine
good,
covers
too.
everywhere.
Yeah.
That was a huge
that
thing. We were
was a
talking
great
about that
one.
the other day. About me and Bob, we were like, how huge that episode was and the whole thing. And it was like the nationwide, like,
The
pick,
clues.
who do
and
you
stuff.
think? Yeah, they
Yeah.
just find the clues and things like that. It was
So
just-
how did
So who did you all
write
think
in?
it was?
I
Just
thought
real quick,
it was
who did you all think it was?
back in the day. I was thinking that they were going to blame it either on Marge or Homer.
I thought, yeah,
think it was-
if I can remember correctly, I thought it was going to end up being Marge.
I thought
Like
it
it
was.
was.
I thought it was Alec Murdoch.
It's gonna be,
Hey,
it's gonna be a
what
really
the-
hardcore Simpsons. It's gonna be a really hardcore Simpsons fan listening in and be like, "What the fuck is it?"
Worst episode ever.
The worst episode ever.
Anyway, all right. So opening questions. All right. Actually, I thought it was Barney, just for whatever it's worth.
I don't know why my fourth grade mind was like, oh, it was Reverend Lovejoy.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why.
He's a funny character.
There's like no clues, like nothing that even, but I guess that's why I was like, it's gonna be Reverend Lovejoy. Like, I don't
And
like that guy.
and then
I like
later
that guy,
we-
but I don't like that guy.
Later, we found out it was Homer. Like at the very in one of the 2018 or 2019, I was watching like clips and shit in there where he says he's driving his car and he's like, "I'm gonna kill this person and blame it on Maggie, just like I did for Mr. Burns, or just like I did with Mr. Burns." This is on an episode like in 2018 or 19 or something like that.
They try to retcon it. Yeah.
Yeah. You see a lot of sitcoms do that. Seinfeld was famous for doing that too, kind of ruining, like George with the contest, saying that he cheated. So a lot of people hate those callbacks when they switch the original ending that everybody loved. Let's go on to our opening questions. What was your first introduction to The Simpsons? Giovanna, you kind of touched upon this a little bit, but was anything else that captivated you or that you wanted to talk about with your intro to The Simpsons?
I always really liked the music in it, like just the random musicals, like Gonna Paint Your Wagon, and like how that whole episode devolves into everybody singing when like Homer and Bart are upset that they rented a musical, right? With not Clint Eastwood. Is it Clint Eastwood? I can't remember who was in the musical.
The Paint Your Wagon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember because it's a real movie. It's based off of a real movie. The real one isn't a musical. I was disappointed to find out. But like, I love that like a lot of the episodes have a lot of music in
Good
them.
Music,
like,
yes.
Yeah, like just the songwriting, like you mentioned the Homer at Bat, right? Like I know that whole song. Like at the end, I know all of that one. I know all of the Stonecutter song. I know all of that one. Like there's just a bunch of like, there's too many songs that I know that are all Simpsons related. And I think for me, like what stands out the most for me and what brings me back is how easily quotable it is, at least for me. Usually my conversations begin with, so this one time on The Simpsons, because I have to give some context before I make the joke, because a lot of people in my circle don't get it because they grew up on like South Park or, had lives. And so they did other things and didn't just sit around and dissect The Simpsons. But yeah, for me, it's that like little things like that. Like Homer's Phobia is one of my all-time favorite episodes. I forgot to mention that one with John Waters. Like I love John Waters' films, so seeing him, seeing him in this episode, I was like, and just like the whole like we work hard, we play hard, and it's just like
gonna make you sweat, yeah.
Yes, there's like hot stuff coming through. Working in so many kitchens, like hearing big burly dudes saying that and not really understanding why you're giggling so hard is, it's the best. Like, yeah. So.
What about you, Bob? What was your introduction to The Simpsons?
Like I said, 6 and 6:30. I remember watching that religiously. Like I think that's the downtime. You get home from school, your parents get home from work, and they're off, trying to make dinner or doing their own thing, and trying to unwind after a long day. And so you pop in front of the TV, and we would watch that. So all the reruns. I mean, I remember same thing from like 1990, the first 7-8 seasons. I knew every introduction. Like when they got on the couch, I knew what the episode was going to be about just based on that little introduction, that little gag that they do every episode. So I watched it religiously, and I quoted it religiously at that time.
For me, probably, I really wouldn't know. I'm pretty sure. I know you used to, when we were younger, fake burp or intend to burp, and I think it was you. They would go, would burp, and they go, "Hey, Elmer!" I think you probably introduced us to it, or introduced me to it at least. I really, I don't know. I can't really remember how I started watching it.
For Bob and Joseph, I know the first time they watched it. Because Fox had been around for about 5.5 years before we got in our area. We're all from the same area, South Texas. Fox started, I think, November 1986. We didn't get Fox until summer of 91 or fall of 91. But there was this big summer preview. And we knew the Mount Rushmore of Fox shows. We knew it was The Simpsons, Married with Children, Beverly Hills 90210, and In Living Color. So we all wanted this channel for these shows, these, 4 or 5 amazing shows that we had heard so much from. Fox had a preview in the summer, and they were going to show all these shows in the summer. They were going to go away and come back in September. So it was June. I remember I had a massive headache. I took a nap, and Bob, Joseph, and I think Joseph's brother, and Bob's older sister, and my brother all watched The Simpsons. They had like 2 or 3 episodes of The Simpsons, and I remember them telling me about how great it was and and I remember being really jealous about it. Like these guys got to watch a show I'd known about, because we all knew about The Simpsons, because before the show we knew that the kids were wearing the Bart Simpson t-shirts. We saw the dolls. We saw the Bartman video, so we knew about
the Butterfinger commercials.
Butterfinger commercials, but we didn't watch the actual shows until Fox finally came to the Valley in the Rio Grande Valley in the fall of 1991. This next question, everybody. We're not picking any immediate Simpsons family members. Why are these secondary characters so important? Why do you think, Jiovanna?
Because they help develop the story. Like it, without like Dr. Hibbert talking smack about Marge when she got arrested, like in Marge in Chains, and we wouldn't know that she has like webbed toes, right? But like, we also wouldn't know, like, without Bart wanting to play the guitar and then giving up and having Otto play it instead, and like having him get fired, and this whole thing that he didn't have a license, he got evicted from his department, and he and his dad, the colonel, they don't get along, right? Like stuff like that. Like this, because of the characters, we don't know the secondary characters. We wouldn't know a lot about the main characters, and like their stories would just kind of be one-dimensional, because if it's not for the relationships of others around them and like the adventures that they go on, like Homer when he helps Apu go to India to get his job back at the Quickie Mart, like, you know, all that stuff, you don't learn all those things about all the things that that Apu knows about, like the longest line at the checkout, you know, the longest checkout line at the grocery store is all single men that don't want to talk to anybody, that are going to pay in cash, that are just going to move quickly. So that's the best line to go in, instead of like the express lane where there's an old man, which is Grandpa Simpson, just so like wanting attention that he'll just tell a story about a nickel that he has in his wallet, you know? So we don't know those things about these people without their interactions with the main characters. And I think it just kind of helps develop the main characters' story arcs, because then you'll get like callbacks to them later and stuff, and they're just necessary.
It keeps the storylines moving forward, man, and it allows the show just to explore like everybody's personalities and all the interactions, and then it's just funny. They're just funny. They did a great job of not only making the immediate family, all have their own individual personalities and funny and interesting in their own ways, but they made every single character in that Simpsons world, even if they've only shown up like 4 or 5 times, be funny or have a line or have some memorable something that people remember, and it's a good callback. I love the one-liners that a lot of them have, like you said, Hans Moleman or Troy McClure. Hi, I'm Troy McClure from, you know, I love that they have that, and you recognize or you connect with all the different characters. And I think that's why it's been able to go on for 30 odd years like it has.
I mean, it's been on for a long time, you know, the show. So if it was just strictly about the family, I mean, I don't think the reason why it's been on so long is because of the fucking, you know, secondary characters, the side characters. You know, we always curse. I think it's what makes the show. I mean, of course it's about the family, but yeah, the interactions with everybody else, and some, you know, you see more than others, mainly the guys at the bar and the people that Homer work with, but such a vast world of, it's a town, but of characters, and you can remember them and remember something funny from all of them pretty much anytime you want. I mean, I just think it's what makes the show tick and go forward.
I agree with everybody. I think you have to keep things fresh and moving. That's why we invite guests on the show like Jiovanna or Joe Michael, who is our very own Mexican Bumblebee guy. I mean, animation allows you to create a world where you can pivot for the quick gag and be funny and irreverent, right? I always found the Unusual Pairings to be the funniest. Like when Homer and Cletus were in a parenting class together, Giovanna, we're talking about that. And funny, you get to create a quick joke about it. You get to see these unusual pairings, or even when they bring out celebrity guests. I'm not a big fan of the celebrity guests, but some of the most memorable ones, when George Harrison during the B Sharps was like driving by and he sees the B Sharps performing on top of a roof, and he's, oh, that'll never work. Or it's been done.
Yeah.
It's been done. Yeah.
I think it's been done.
So, I mean, those things help to create a vast world. And when, you know, we sour on Homer or Marge, or we get tired of Bart's antics, we get to see these different individuals play into maybe their stories or create their own little universe. And that's what makes, and you see a lot of TV shows doing this too. Ted Lasso, I remember one of the best episodes of last season, they sort of pivoted to Coach Beard. He had like his own episode where he goes out and hangs out and gets into all these weird adventures. So the Simpsons were kind of like the pioneers of doing that, like taking a secondary character and giving them their own storyline and show to work with, and they just did an amazing job with it. So next question, everybody. How does The Simpsons compare to some of the other popular animated TV series like Family Guy, South Park? What do y'all think?
It's the first animated comedy show that pushed the boundaries of TV. Before there was Family Guy and before there was South Park and an Archer and all these other animated shows that have like a lot of adult jokes in them, there was The Simpsons. You know what I mean? They crawled so everybody else could walk. They are the originals. They have a lot now. Looking back and watching a lot of the older episode that I loved as a kid, I miss so many jokes that I now get as an adult, and it makes it that much more funnier. So I think they're the gold standard. They're the original badasses.
Like I like South Park, you know, like I don't watch it religiously, but I've watched enough of it, enough episodes to appreciate it is what I mean. Not enough South Park. My boyfriend's gonna listen to this. He loves South Park the way I love Simpsons. I don't think like South Park compares, or Family Guy compares, or even American Dad to The Simpsons. I think when I stopped liking The Simpsons as much as I do now personally, or did before, was when they started trying to compete with Family Guy, because I think it happened because they were on the same network and they were probably getting a little more like, oh, you know, their ratings are a little better. But Family Guy is a different type of monster all its own. The Simpsons, so South Park has that whole episode, The Simpsons already did it. You know, so I think that everything that comes after is just people trying to redo it. So like my big issue with like Family Guy, for instance, not to shit all over Family Guy. I do watch Family Guy every once in a while. But I remember them doing like their Stephen King episodes, right? And I was like, The Simpsons already did this. Like, why are they trying to remake The Shining? Like The Simpsons already did this with The Shining in like 90, whatever, like sitting there just super angry and like pulling it apart. And I'm like, or tearing it apart. I'm just like, why am I so bothered by this? Like I have nothing to gain from being upset by this. And I think South Park did a good job of the whole Simpsons already did it thing, you know, because they've been around for so long. They've been around so long that their jokes and satire has become reality. Like that's the scary thing. And so I don't think there's a comparison for me anyway. Like the Simpsons are just far beyond different from anything else that's out there.
I wouldn't have Family Guy if there wasn't The Simpsons. I acknowledge that, and I acknowledge what Bob said. You know, it's the gold standard and whatnot.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And
love you.
That's a good point.
As big a fan as Jiovanna is of The Simpsons, I think it, and the fact that you've said you don't watch it anymore, I think it's lost its edge. I really do. I understand. Like I said, I acknowledge it. And I know that you talked about right now about how Family Guy has done things that, you know, Simpsons already did. And that's true. But I have not gotten tired of watching. And I know Family Guy hasn't been on the air as long as The Simpsons, but I'm not tired of watching it. I'm recording it tonight. I'm going to watch it, either later tonight or tomorrow or something. And I don't really watch The Simpsons anymore either, but I've never gotten tired of Family Guy.
I think. Go ahead, Jiovanna.
Sorry. Okay, your dog is super cute, and I want to pet him and give him all the hugs and kisses. But two, I guess since
it's stuffed
edits. Excuse me. One of the big reasons I think that I stopped watching The Simpsons and that I don't watch Family Guy and all that stuff, because this happened before I became a mom to a kid that always takes over the TV, was that I just grew out of it. Like I just outgrew the humor personally, right? And it was more like, okay, well, if I'm going to spend a few hours of my time watching TV, I'm either really stressed out and anxious because I'm in grad school and I'm just drinking and watching something so that I can write. So it'll just be like The Simpsons on repeat, or Friends on repeat, or whatever, just something comforting in the background that doesn't take my attention from the things that I have to get done, right? But as far as like newer shows or newer episodes, I haven't watched very much. The latest, or like the newest show that I sat down and watched was, I think, Moon Knight. I watched Moon Knight and it was late. I was late to the game, but only because of like time constraints and other commitments that I had. So it's all of that stuff is kind of like moved down my totem pole of like responsibilities and like what I'd rather spend my time doing or what I need to spend my time doing. So I'm not going to sit and watch like a subpar cartoon, which for me is what The Simpsons have become, right? Granted, I haven't watched any of the newer episodes, and from like all the Simpsons shit posting like pages that I'm on and like obscure Simpsons references and Rancho Relaxo, all that stuff on Facebook, a lot of the new episodes are really good. And there's been like a shift into where like the humor's gone back to kind of what it used to be. So I haven't watched any of those, but you know, there's that thing like personal responsibilities versus what I'm willing to spend my time doing. TV is just not on the top of my list.
For our last opening question, and I'll answer this one before I ask you all to answer. Has the show suffered from cancel culture and the modern day view of what comedy cannot say or do? I think we're in a more sensitive and tolerable society. You know, I think we have a more focused sensory of what we shouldn't say or do now because of cancel culture in modern times. Take whatever Simpsons character you want. I mean, there's a cognitive dissonance because we enjoyed these storylines, and some were heartfelt, but oftentimes their background was fodder for jokes that were stereotypical. So finding that balance nowadays is difficult. I mean, Hank Azaria voiced Apu, but he was cast in the same era where Fisher Stevens, also not Indian, was playing Ben Jabatuya in Short Circuit, Johnny Five. It's a discourse that was bound to happen as we
Javedi.
Is Gepetti? Is that what
it's Javetti. He always shouts it because they're always like Benjamin Jarvie, and he says Javetti. He always gets pissed off. I was like, wait a minute, who?
You're talking about Mr. Johnny Five?
Yes. Good callback. Anyway, it's a discourse that was bound to happen as we grew more aware of identities and fairness, right? It happened on Family Guy too. Mike Henry, who is white-voiced Cleveland Brown, and Consuela, the maid on Family Guy. Simpsons, not immune to the cultural shifts. But I asked this because Bumblebee Guy, we're all Mexican Americans. Bumblebee Guy was based on Mexican superhero El Chapulín Colorado. You guys remember that, show that your grandma made you watch? Bumblebee Guy, we found out later, spoke with a British accent too. So I don't know if he's the best example. But what are y'all's take on?
He nailed that fucking accent, though.
Unlike I did last week. But what do y'all's take on the cancel culture? Is The Simpsons, has it drowned out a bit because of today's society, or is it just a natural progression of it's just getting older? What do y'all's take?
I think every show has, man. It's kind of become ridiculous nowadays. Like comedy should be comedy. I mean, it's not supposed to be taken seriously. It's not supposed to be taken literally. I guess you could see it through a lot of the TV shows these days as well. Like, if you watch a show like The Simpsons or Family Guy or South Park and you're watching it to laugh, you're going to laugh. If you're watching it to be offended, you're going to be offended.
So when the whole Apu thing came out, that documentary came out about Apu and how, horrible it was for the Indian American community to exist and all this stuff because of Apu, I was asked a lot, like, Gio, what do you think about this? Like, what are your thoughts on this? And my thoughts at the time, like what I would say at the time, my go-to was like, I'm Mexican and I was never offended by Bumblebee Man. Like, I'm a Latina and I was never offended by Dr. Nick Riviera, right?
What about Steven Spielberg?
Hi, Dr. Nick.
Yeah. But as I got older and the more I reflected on it, I realized it doesn't matter if it offends me. And Bumblebee Man wouldn't affect us in the community that we grew up in, right? Because we're all the majority of us are Mexican American, and we're Mexican, and we've grown up watching telenovelas and these caricatures of people. We grew up on Chavo del Ocho, and R.I.P. Chavelo. Just gotta say, He passed away yesterday. R.I.P. Chavelo. But anyway, we grew up on this. So I remember never really hearing much about Bumblebee Man or Dr. Nick Riviera, but I remember hearing people trying to sound like Apu, like Mexicans and Mexican Americans and white kids trying to sound like Apu and making it a joke. And when I thought about that, I was like, I can understand, and, places like, LA or, excuse me, or New York or any other place that has a bigger Indian American community than the RTV does, being offended or being treated differently because of the caricature that is being portrayed of their community through Apu. And I understand that The Simpsons are a caricature of the American family, right? Like the average Joe, like all the crap that Homer goes through, like no real human could ever, like that wouldn't ever happen to a human in real life, like he gets to go into outer space. He becomes an astronaut from one day to the next. Like he, I don't know, has survived so many falls and so many hits to the head, a crayon into the brain, like all these things. Like he's a caricature of an American man, right? So I get that. But the people being made fun of on a daily basis, I mean, they can tell themselves that over and over, but it's going to affect you at some point. So I don't know if suffered is the correct word for becoming more aware of that, the fact that what we say and how we perceive people and making fun of people or culture just to make fun, just for laughs. I don't know if suffered is the right word. I think that when the Simpsons screwed up when they tried to get Lisa to explain it all away, right? Hank Azaria was on top of it. He was like, I'm so sorry, I never meant to do this. Like he genuinely apologized and he genuinely felt horrible about it, which I think is also really important. But when the Simpsons themselves tried to use Lisa, where she looked directly at the camera and made some comment about how people are now being offended by things that were the norm in the past, like Randall, you and I had this conversation about when you had your son watch Mod Squad, I think it was, or was it
Monster Squad?
Yeah, right. That there is a certain use of a word, right, that is derogatory. It has always been derogatory, but it was more used in the 80s, more freely used in the 80s than it is now. You use it now and you're done.
Yeah.
Right. Like you don't do that now. So I think the fact that we're being more, as a society, we're being more aware that the fact that the things that we say and how we mock people, for lack of a better word, that it actually affects whole communities. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that comedy needs to stop being funny, but I think you can be funny without harming or doing harm to a whole community of people. The conversation usually stems from people that have been harassed or that have been mocked because of something that they saw on The Simpsons, right? Like that one documentary about Apu was made by like a millennial that grew up being harassed. And even he said that he loved The Simpsons and he loved the portrayal of Apu, that he thought it was hilarious, but that he started working, if I'm not misremembering this, that he started working on the documentary, putting it together, because he noticed that people in his community were upset by it. So he wanted to find out why they were upset by it. And that's how it just kind of snowballed into what it became. And then Hank Azaria was made aware. And also because the Simpsons have also gone to great lengths to like recast other voice actors. So like the voice actor that I think it was Harry Shearer that voiced Dr. Hibbert, he doesn't voice him anymore. They have a black man voice Dr. Hibbert, right? And honestly, like when it comes to people of color, I think they should have voice actors of color. Like I remember watching BoJack Horseman and wondering like, who is voicing Diane Wynn? Like, who is that? Like that voice is familiar to me. And I looked it up and it's Alison Brie.
Yeah.
Like no hate to Alison Brie, but it's one of the whitest women that I can think of to voice an Asian woman. And it wouldn't have been that much of a problem, I guess, if there wasn't a whole character, like a whole episode devoted to her going to her country of origin to try to get in touch with her familial roots as a white woman voicing an Asian actor. Like you can't find an Asian actor in like 2014, when they created BoJack Horseman. It's just little things like that I think representation matters. And when people and communities are represented in a certain way that it just leads to mocking, like I don't think that's healthy.
So let's go ahead and move on to our honorable mentions. Giovanna, we'll start. Let's hold it down to about 3 or 5 on this one, Giovanna. I know you probably have a list of about 50.
Yeah. I have 1,000.
No,
right. I got it down to 9. Okay. But no, so Dr. Hibbert,
5,
Dr.
Giovanna.
Okay, Dr. Hibbert, Barney, Itchy and Scratchy, they count as one.
Okay, they count as one.
Principal Skinner and Sideshow Bob. Those are my 5. Yeah,
those are good.
Yeah.
Bob, what about you?
You got to go Sideshow Bob for obvious reasons. Chief Wiggum, I think Chief Wiggum's the funniest character on the actual show. It might be a tie between him and Homer and Grandpa Simpson, who's another one of my honorable mentions. But yeah, those 3 guys, I think they're great. They're hilarious. And I love that Sideshow Bob his only mission on the show is just to kill Bart and to take revenge. So I think that's a cool little story arc. So yeah, those 3 guys do it for me.
I have a comment about that, but we'll talk about that later, I guess.
Joseph, what about you? What are your honorable mentions?
I also got Chief Wiggum as well. I always love Dr. Nick, so it's rare.
Hey, Dr. Nick.
I love how he's a cheap version, but he's always funny. And Fat Tony, just because I love Joe Montana.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. I love Chief Wiggum. Let that be a lesson to the rest of you.
I think
nuts.
he's
the pecans.
The pecans when he shoots the pecans. That's great.
Think that's hilarious, dude.
Grandpa, I love Grandpa Simpson as well. I think he's hilarious. I also had Hans Moleman just because he's just, I don't know. He's just so durable. He's adorable. He's funny. I love him. I also had Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz. I think the great Phil Hartman sadly missed, and he was missed on this show as well. So loved him on that show. So let's go ahead and go on to our selection. Sideshow Bob, you're up first. What do you got for us?
Yeah, we got to go. I'm going with Krusty the Clown, man. I grew up on Bozo, and I feel like Krusty might be like closely based off of that character. I love that he's this lovable jokester that hosts a kid's TV show, but during the commercial breaks he's a smoker and he's cursing and he's an asshole and a jerk, so he's very relatable in that kind of sense. He's so different from his persona on camera. I love that he has all this cheap merchandise and he has a burger chain. He's like the bad Ronald McDonald character. He's just perfect, dude. He's so much more relatable now that I'm an adult than I was when I was a kid, because it finally like you get that like, just because an actor is a certain way on screen, that doesn't mean he's going to be the same way, in person when the cameras are off. So I think he's the most realistic and relatable character on The Simpsons. He was one of my favorites as a kid. He was even more so now that I'm an adult.
So Krusty the Clown. Bob, what is up with you in selecting clowns? We had Pennywise a few episodes back, and now Krusty. I'm not the biggest fan. I'm not the biggest fan of clowns.
I love clowns.
Yeah, clowns don't scare me.
I had a reoccurring, this is a true story. I had a reoccurring dream from age 4 to 7 that Ronald McDonald kidnapped me. So that led to a little bit of therapy and a lot of Wendy's Baconators. Let me just put it out there. Okay. So I think a running theme is Krusty the Clown is a very depressing figure. He's shameless, self-promoter. I wasn't crazy about the pick at first, but the more scenes I watched, the more I felt like he's one of the most honest characters. And I really appreciate him for that. He's a celebrity who loves the money and adulation, but hates people, and he hates being inconvenienced. He has a temper and a terrible ego. He's a lot like Sean Penn, if you want to just, put it out there. I read that creator Matt Groening he can't be in the same room with Dan Castellaneta. I am sure I mispronounced that, when he does the Krusty voice, because he'll mess up on a take. He'll start laughing. So Krusty was created by cartoonist Matt Groening and partially inspired by Rusty Nails, a television clown from Groening's hometown of Portland, Oregon. He was designed to look like Homer Simpson with clown makeup, with the original idea being that Bart worships a television clown who is actually his own father in disguise. His voice is based on Bob Bell, who portrayed Bozo the Clown, as you mentioned, Bob. He lacks pathos, I think. He's cynical. He's burnt out. He's addiction-riddled smoker who is miserable. We know he uses drugs because he once performed Break On Through by the Doors, high off his clown ass. Okay, he's intriguing, though, because he's so intriguing that he's been giving the center stage of a few episodes, and he's even been giving a backstory. Not all the characters have backstories. We know of Herschel's backstory. I feel like he's best in small doses. That's when Krusty shines. He's created this sort of circus world, no pun intended, that has spun off some other great characters. We mentioned Sideshow Bob. He's got a couple other sidekicks out there. He's a terrible person down to his core, and probably the second most dubious behind Mr. Burns. Here's a quick list of the horrible things Krusty has done. He saved Saddam Hussein's life during the Gulf War. He almost got Homer killed by the mob for $48. He sold dangerous merchandise to Krusty-O's with a jagged Krusty-O medal. He gambled away his secret daughter's violin to Fat Tony. He let Camp Krusty become a labor camp for kids. What did they serve, Giovanna, for that meal?
Gruel.
Delicious gruel. Delicious gruel. He killed his ventriloquist dummy, Alphonse, live on air and traumatized millions of children. He faked his own death twice to cheat taxes. Okay, maybe that one's not so bad. He bet against the Harlem Globetrotters. He got married 14 times. He became a Republican congressman. All these things are terrible, but we love Krusty the Clown. Giovanna, what are your thoughts on him?
I love how much they, like you said, that they've like fleshed out Krusty. Like we learned that he has an estranged father, right? Rabbi Krustovsky. And then we later learned, thanks to Lester and Eliza, we learned that he also had an estranged wife. And then we later learned that he had a child who was actually voiced by Drew Barrymore, right? And it's all these like little things that come together to create this like horrible person, and you still can't help but like him, right? And feels like, oh, Krusty. I will say that I hate clowns. I'm horrified of clowns. The only two clowns I'm not afraid of are Krusty the Clown and the Joker. And I don't even know if the Joker actually counts as a clown, but those are the only, like, every iteration of the Joker has never bothered me, but just clowns in general, I'm not a fan. And I love Krusty. I actually have a Krusty doll and I have a Simpsons Homer doll. So when my kid was younger, she was looking at both of them and she was like, ketchup, catsup, just kind of staring at him like, it's the same doll. Like, what is this? One has hair, one doesn't. Like, what? She's like, ketchup, catsup. Like, they're the same one. But yeah, I just love him. Like, I actually used his whole hey thing, like when I'm texting or when I'm sending, like when I haven't spoken to someone in a while, I'm like, hey, you know, and then I just kind of go on with my whole thing. Some people get it, some don't. And yeah, like I love Krusty. I have no hate for Krusty. Krusty's awesome.
Joseph.
He's so funny, and at the same time, like, yes, like I love that he wants to be loved, but only to make money and be rich. That's the only reason why he wants to be loved. But then privately, like, leave me the fuck alone. You know, he can't catch a break. It seems everything he tries to do is a failure, and it just makes him more miserable on the side. I think it's I think honestly, like, I know it sounds crappy, but it's a representation of like most of us when we get older. It's just like, yeah, like Bob said, it's like, well, fuck, we're smiling in public, trying to get through the day, but when we get home, we're just like, fuck this shit. I just think it's like I mentioned real quickly that, you know, he's been the the center of at least a few episodes with things that he's done. The biggest break, I said he never catches a break, but the biggest break he did catch was Bart believing that he didn't rob the store and that he wasn't a criminal. So that's one time one time his luck was great. It worked out for him. Great pick.
Giovanna, you're up next. Who did you pick?
I picked Professor Frink. I love Professor Frink because, he makes you laugh, he makes you think, and then he likes to run and the thing with the person. I love Professor Frink. To me, it's just when I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, this explains why I like nerds. One, I am one. And two, they're just goofy, right? Like Professor Frink is super goofy and super sweet at the same time. Like everything he does, he tries to do to help the town, but then it just creates disaster, right? Like one of my favorites is when he builds that house for the security system, and the house gets up and starts running and then falls over and catches fire, and it's hilarious. And I like that his backstory is like at one point in, I think like the second season, and I think it's Brother, Can I Borrow Two Dimes or something like that. It's a second, oh my God, it's a second Danny DeVito episode where he plays Homer's brother, and they go to like the inventor convention, and the inventor convention, like he has this one invention, which is a plane for whatever reason for toddlers or for kids, infants, and his son is in it. And so he's like, oh no, once it crashes, he's like, my wife is going to kill me. So we know that he has a son and we know that he's married. But then later when he takes the elixir, he's like, that Grandpa Simpson comes up with in like Abe Simpson against versus sexual inadequacy or whatever the episode's called. He like starts talking to this one girl, and like they walk off like this other, doctor or scientist, and she's like, yes, sir. And, like all nerdy, and they walk off together to go make out. Like he's ridiculous and amazing and funny. And just every time he's on, he makes me laugh. Like he makes me smile. He makes me so happy, even when he's like harassing preschoolers and not letting them play with like that one toy that he's playing with. And he's like, the colors, children, he's great. He's great. I love him. He's just so weird and he's great. I love him.
So Professor Frink, whoa, slow down, egghead. Okay. I have to say this is Glyvin. Okay. So had to get that out of the way. How can you hate someone who invented the 8-month after pill? Right? I mean,
and hamburger earmuffs.
Hamburger earmuffs.
Yes.
So he's on a list of a lot of reputable writers. That means mainly anyone outside of BuzzFeed on their list of best Simpsons characters, right? Many of these characters are like position players off the bench of good basketball teams. Some guys come off the bench for defense, some for shooting. Professor Frink is like a very specific role player because any science fiction episode that is on the show, he's going to be there. And he's essentially Jerry Lewis from The Nutty Professor. And I mean, what a great movie that was, and what a great tribute it is to the all-time great Jerry Lewis. He's the town's mad scientist. So unlike many secondary characters that have to be shoehorned in for moving the show along, he's a necessary trope because of all the sci-fi stuff the Simpsons do. You have to have Professor Frink because he gets to explain it all, and he does it in his own original, funny way. He's a fun bridge, but I can't see him being a multifaceted, focused out, fleshed out character. We've seen some of his backstory, and I know they've done some stuff with him, but it's like The Rock. When you watch a movie with The Rock, Rock's got to fight, Rock's got to wear cars. I mean, he's got to race cars, he's got to wear tight t-shirts. You can't give him a monologue or have him go toe-to-toe with Gary Oldman. Some action stars can evolve like Bruce Willis, but The Rock is always going to be the guy with a cool actor name who plays a divorced cop. He's got a lane. For many, that's okay. And that's essentially Professor Frink. With anything scientific is involved, that's his lane. But you want him there because he's going to make you laugh. He's going to make you think, as you mentioned, and we love him for it. Does he ever actually have dialogue outside of the science? It just seems like his inventions or appearances are there for the relatable distraction, which is great. I think it breaks the monotony of the storyline. I feel like he's never had a story, and I'd love to hear a Professor Frink story. Maybe I've missed that episode. I don't feel like he's had a meaningful back and forth dialogue and interaction with other characters other than getting that machine that makes calls for Happy Dude or whatever, and he tries to get it back to his office. I'm not saying that makes him a bad character. He's very funny. I love him. That just makes you a bad person for choosing him. No, just joking. Okay. I see him as a very specific joke, a funny, well-crafted joke, but very intentional when it comes to science. Bob, what do you think of Professor Frink?
I love that he's a play on Jerry Lewis's own, and he kind of looks like him. They kind of, drew at least I see it. The caricature drawing is reminiscent of Jerry Lewis in that movie, in that film. The same, kind of hairstyle and the teeth. I love that he has these solutions, or he's always inventing something, and I love his attempts to better the community, even though it's always a fuck up. But like you, Ran, there's not, as far as I can tell too, there hasn't been a full-on story with him, and and maybe that's, I don't know, maybe why they haven't done it. Another character voiced by Hank Azaria, which is, the guy does everything. I don't know, and even it's fun to hear him even throw a suggestion when when a town crisis is happening that doesn't necessarily have to have a scientific solution. He'll still I can do, I'll build something. No, we don't need you to build something, but he'll still make it funny. But I think he works out. What's great about the show itself is the many Treehouse of Horrors they've done, and his character works out perfectly for those. You do see him a lot in the Treehouse of Horror because he's that mad scientist, so they can have him come out as something related to that in those episodes, and it'll always work out perfect. And I think that's where he shines. But he is a very, very funny character. He's just limited, unfortunately, and we haven't really seen, much of him. Other, he does have a wife. I know that, right? He does have a wife. Pretty sure.
Well, he mentions it in that one episode.
Yeah. But we never really see her, right? As far as I can tell.
Unless it was that one that he was talking to in that one episode I mentioned about. Was it sexual inadequacy?
Yeah.
Because her name is Caroline. She has a name.
Yes.
And
Dr.
we later
Caroline
learn
Fink.
and we later learn about his dad. So there's that whole episode with his dad too. Which
was
an episode devoted to
son.
Frank.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't seen that one.
I think Professor Frink, I'm not tech savvy at all, but I think somebody needs to supercut all his episodes, all his appearances into the McBain movie that you can actually watch. Because you know how the running gag is the McBain clips of this one movie. You can actually find that on YouTube. Somebody supercut it and it's an actual movie. I think somebody needs to supercut all the Professor Frink appearances and create the Frink movie, because I think there's enough.
Yeah, no, his voice alone is the thing that makes him hilarious. He's just, when you hear Professor Fink and he starts talking, that's the thing that gets, it doesn't matter what he says, he's fucking hilarious. I wish he did, like you said, I don't want to repeat what Rand and Joseph said. He doesn't get enough parts. He doesn't get enough storyline. He doesn't have enough backstory line. I think that they put him in this little niche where it's just if it's anything they're doing with the end of the world or science or something like that, or horror, Treehouse of Horrors, that's when he'll, that's his time to shine. But I wish he did have more speaking parts and more of a backstory. I really do think he's a really funny character. I just don't think he's as developed as somebody like one of the picks that we've all made on the show today. So I think that's where he's lacking.
I will say this, Giovanna, I had a bigger appreciation for him after researching him and finding out how many funny things he was involved in. I'm from the way he answers the phone, lab,
yes,
to all the stuff. His dialogue is he's
He's no Dr. Nick though.
He's no Dr. Nick, but he's this. I think he's the intelligent.
He's smarter than Dr. Nick.
He's the intelligent person's pick, because a lot of the stuff he says, I think sometimes we're watching it and we're let's go back to the bar and see the dummies and laugh. But when Professor Frink comes in, that's when it's okay, it gets sciencey, it gets funny, and it gets nerdy, and that's what's cool about it.
Yeah, no, I'm sticking by my pick. I love Professor Frink, and it was a close one because it was either Professor Frink or Dr. Hibbert, because Dr. Hibbert's got a shady past. But I had to go with Frink.
Dr. Hibbert's many hairstyles from the decades.
Dr. Hibbert has two long lost brothers. He has two long lost brothers, one of which is Bleeding Gums Murphy, and the other one is his twin from the orphanage director in Shelbyville. I mean, what happened to this man's life that he has two long lost brothers and is willing or knows that a healthy baby can get $60K off the black market? Come on now. This man, his
character.
He's got a backstory. But Professor Frink just makes me so happy. I just had to go with him.
It's a great pick. Joseph, you're up next.
All right. I picked Jeff Albertson, commonly known as the comic book guy. All the secondary characters, his appearances can be limited, but I think they're more memorable. as his name would entail, he's the owner of the Androids Dungeon and Baseball Card Shop. I think out of all, like I said, out of all secondary characters on the show, he's probably has the best catchphrase. Worst ever. I enjoy his nerdy and argumentative attitude towards all things pop culture. It's because of this that he's given so many memorable quotes on the show as a secondary character, like the internet king. I wonder if he can provide faster nudity, and there's no emoticon for what I'm feeling. There's always whatever he is. Like I said, appearances may be limited, but they're always so memorable because of what he says. Again, being the owner of the comic book store, he's obsessed with collecting comic books, and is an avid science fiction buff. I love that after all this time, they've kind of given his character traits. I don't want to say a history, but you do know things about him. Like he has a master's degree in folklore and mythology. He's a chemical engineer degree. He has an IQ of 170 and he's part of Mensa. You know these things about him at least. You think that with all of that going for him, he'd be into something more, but no, he loves his comics and he's obsessed with arguing with you if you see things different than he does about such topics, and I love that. On a personal note, for a character as dorky as he is and nerdy and whatnot, he landed Kamiko, so he's doing something right.
I mean, he also dated Agnes Skinner, so
yeah.
I mean.
Well, I like to focus on the positive of Kamiko. I've always loved that how he's about his comics and comic movies and pop culture. Like I said, in general, I love the joke being made about how, obsessive people can be about things like that. I love his outlook on life. I have my own collection of items and certain things, so I can relate to, buying things that you want to hold on to for a long time. I can understand that. And I think
limited edition
sometimes.
Who wouldn't want Lucy Lawless and Carbonite? I mean, come on, it's Lucy Lawless. Like
an Elvin in the Chipmunks,
And I think he's just such a memorable character. You love it when he comes out on an episode because you're going to laugh when you see him. He's going to say something funny, even if it's just his catchphrase. And to add to how awesome, like I said, this character is, he's made cameos on both the Cleveland Show and Family Guy. I know we spoke about that earlier. He's made those cameos. Both times delivering the catchphrase. In the Cleveland Show, he came out and said worst cameo ever, and I thought it was, it's just, I mean, he's the guy. You put him in another person's show and he does his catchphrase. And then on the Family Guy crossover episode with the Simpsons, I know it's a crossover episode, so it's both shows, but on the Family Guy portion of that crossover, he did come out on there and on that show, and again, it's the worst chicken fight ever. So I mean, it's two cameos on two other shows technically. So I think he's definitely one of if not the best secondary characters on the show. What do you guys think?
It took this podcast for me to realize he has a name, Jeff Albertson. I know that was a Super Bowl episode, shame on me, but I totally forgot he had a real name. Loneliness and cheeseburgers are a dangerous mix. What a quote, right? And then he has the teenager with a squeaky voice wheelbarrowing him in the hospital. Yeah. Hey, Mr. Terwilliger. No, wait, that's the guy. Anyway, I love how the two guys who shit on my picks every week pick the two characters with the most disagreeable personalities. That's just right. Yeah. Okay, but comic book guy, he's eloquent, he's sarcastic, and he's crabby. It's like he's all three of us combined, Bob and Joseph. That's why I think we love him so much. Comic book guy was once married in an online role-playing game. I think you mentioned this. And he has his internet wife contemplating having children, but that would have severely drained his power crystals. So love that. He at one point also hopes to wed Xena, warrior princess. Well, the cardboard figure, right? Not the actual warrior princess. His self-esteem is tied to his comic book store. I mean, he lords over it, and he creates this fiefdom to belittle people who are essentially into the same hobbies he's into, but don't know as much as he does, right? He treats these people like society treats him. That's where he gets his power from. I think this character is an insightful look at how people would act if they were given power. Comic book guy owns a store, has a lot of knowledge, and essentially likes to deliver his opinion as if it were fact. It's the modern day equivalent of being a podcast host, excuse me. If this show was created today, he'd be a smarmy podcaster, and he'd have these 3-hour-long shows and like 24 monthly downloads from his faithful listeners. That's what he would be, a modern day comic book guy. To piss fans off, they gave him a name, the aforementioned Jeff Albertson, and it was given to him during the post-Super Bowl episode to piss fans off. His name was going to be Lewis Lane, but Matt Groening wasn't present when the writers named him. It was going to be a play on Lois Lane. So he also has a bumper sticker on his car that reads, "My other car is a Millennium Falcon," given to him by a Harrison Ford lookalike. This character will always be relevant. I think, Giovanna, you had dated at least 2 or 3 guys like this, right? So
a few, yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about Comic Book Guy and how he compared to those guys.
I think I realized a few days ago that, yes, Comic Book Guy's most quoted line is "worst whatever ever," right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the one that I picked up from him was freaking kids. Like, I realized, because I said this to my own child, like, or I said it of my own child when she was, being 4 and annoying. And I was like, "Oh, freaking kid." And I was like, "Ha!" Like, that's a Comic Book Guy thing. So no, definitely. I love him. I think he's hilarious. And I did like when I kind of cringed at it at the same time, but like Agnes and Comic Book Guy, like coming together, like it was oddly satisfying to watch them find happiness, because they're 2 of the most like curmudgeon characters that you could possibly like imagine being together, which I get that, right? And I loved that on their dates, like they were watching people get hurt or watching people be unhappy, and that's what made them happy. Like, I was like, this is fantastic. I love this. So
I relate to that.
Yes, right? Like, you like other people suffering sometimes. Like, it's just like, yes, I'm happy that you also feel crappy right now. Like, that makes me happy. Or like somebody fell and I'm the worst because I can't stop laughing when somebody falls, even when it's me or like when it's my child, and I have to try to like assess the situation. I'm crying of laughter the whole time before actually trying to see if they're okay. But that's what I do like about him as well. And what you were talking about, Randall, about the whole that, he lords over his comic book shop, and when he's away from it, it's like his power is depleted. So there's just the one episode, I forget what it's called, but it's the one where Homer becomes a boxer, and they're at this like, well, he boxes Dredrick Tatum and he gets his ass kicked. But before all that, they're at like this weird like collectible place, and he's trying to return a belt or exchange a belt that he won at a Star Trek convention because it's a medium and he needs like an extra large. And the guy that he's talking to, he's like, "Whoa, a sarcastic, fat Star Trek man, like you don't know how to deal with this," kind of mocking him. And he's like whatever. He's like, "No receipt, no returns." And Bart offers him like $5 for it or something. So he's like, he gives him the money. He's like, "Very well." He's like, "Now must go back to my comic book store where I dispense the insults rather than absorb them." And he just leaves because he makes that, like he knows that he only has power in his one domain. And I love that about him because it's like me, like, look at this 7.5-pound book that I have, like, of the Simpsons. And somebody talks to me about something that's not the Simpsons, and I'm like, "That's cool, but did you know that this one time on the Simpsons," like, he has a little bit of my heart for that reason. He's he is the epitome of fandom, of every fandom, and I think that's why he's great.
Yeah, he's definitely the guy that takes things too far at a Comic-Con. I think that's exactly who he is. And I think my favorite line is "No, it is a limited edition," and he goes off of whatever the fuck. Like, "Hey, I like your Superman cape." "No, it's a limited edition, blah, blah, blah." So that's always been the line that's always stuck with me. He's again, a great character, funny in his own way, very well-rounded, doesn't have a ton of screen time. I don't think he moves. I don't think he probably should have more of a backstory. I wish they did more episodes on him, considering that, he is a major player in the town, considering he owns his own shop. That it's more than what a lot of people do in the town. So I think it's a good pick, Joseph. I wouldn't say it's the best pick. I wouldn't say he's the best character. I wouldn't say that I turn on The Simpsons and be like, "Oh shit, I just hope he's going to be on this episode." But he is a great person or a character to see when they do come on. You're hoping he says something rude, and he's, it's out in comic book. He's everybody has a buddy or somebody we know that's really into comics or a specific something, and he just reminds you of that person. So he's a very good pick, very relatable pick, I think. Yeah. So good job, dude. I like that one.
I think he's the pick that has aged the best. I think when he started, comic book shops were a thing, but they were so enclosed. I think now with the DC and Marvel universe and all these things that have come about, Star Wars, Star Trek, everything else, he's become more and more relevant, and he looks like the people who run these shops and talk about these movies. Not all of them, right? But the majority of them. So I think this is the character that they hit it right on the money with predicting the future, how big this character could potentially be and what storylines they could plant this character into, because the comic book world and the card collection world has all exploded over, the course of the past couple of decades. So fun pick and good pick. And when you're talking about him, we all couldn't help but smile because we all love comic book guy. So lastly, I will go up, and my pick is Mo. I went with Springfield's favorite bellicose bartender, Mo Sizlak, or how the ladies call him, Hey You Behind the Bushes. So the creator of The Simpsons, Matt Groening, based Mo on Louis Red Deutsch, who was made famous when he was repeatedly prank called by two Jersey City residents. These prank calls were the inspiration for Bart Simpson's repeated prank calls to Mo, and we all know him, Huge Ass, Amanda Hug and Kiss, and there are a few others. And Deutsch's often profane responses inspired Mo's violent temper. Comedian Rich Hall was an acquaintance of The Simpsons writer George Meyer. He has stated that he believes further inspiration was drawn from himself to Mo, and that Groening has verified this. I actually remember Rich Hall. Rich Hall was a comedian. He was briefly on Saturday Night Live when I think Julia Louis-Dreyfus was on that year. He was maybe on but I remember Rich Hall particularly for a show on HBO called Not Necessarily the News. He used to do a segment called Sniglets, and the segment called Sniglets, like, when you don't have words for something that people do, he would give them words and he would, use them as examples. So Rich Hall was a very funny comedian. He was voiced by Hank Azaria, but was originally voiced by Christopher Charles Collins, who is best known for voicing Cobra Commander in the G.I. Joe cartoons and Starscream in the first Transformers animated series. Starting to talk like comic book guy here. But everyone found him to be a dick, so he was later replaced by Azaria. He's got a sweet, genuine side, does Mo. We find out that he reads to sick children in the hospital. He volunteers at homeless shelters, and he's always the head of every angry mob, which I love. He's great with women. You look pretty clean. Would you like to dance? Was one of his pickup lines, one I would love to have used. As a kid, I found him hilariously amusing. As an adult, I find him hilariously relatable. Okay, so his unrequited love for Marge was a hilarious running gag. I think it still is. And he was one of the original Little Rascals until he killed the original Alfalfa. So being a former child actor, he had a difficult transition to adulthood like Corey Feldman or Drew Barrymore, and we all love him, right? Anyway, he was presented as a depressed character, but doesn't realize how much he makes everyone feel better around him. Despite his schemes, his illegal activities, his cantankerous demeanor, Mo is the stress relief character. People talk to him just like any bartender, right? He's the safety valve that allows the writers to do and say whatever they want in society. And I believe they took an everyman who is down on his luck to represent the often cruelties of life, failure, and rejection, and allowed Mo to be a mainstay and central figure. Look past his transgressions and look at his longevity. He's been there since season 1. And other than Cheers, he's helped to craft the bartender characters that we see so oftentimes on TV shows. I love his brutal honesty. I love his vulnerability. Some jokes haven't aged well because I was watching a lot of clips and I was like, I can't mention that. But though he's morally inept, he's unlucky in life. We see that Mo redeems himself time and time again. He's there for his friends when they need him. He's the glue guy. He doesn't shine as brightly as the main cast, but he's always there with a quip or unsolicited advice or some dubious support. That's all you really need from a good supporting character. And lastly, my favorite Mo scene. Well, there's two. There's one where he's doing the lie detector test on Who Shot Mr. Burns. Yeah, the Sears catalog. Yeah, you guys got to YouTube this. Go type in Mo the bartender lie detector test. It's too intricate to go into. But Springfield, there's this one other scene that I love. Springfield is doing a dating auction to raise funds for the fire department, and when Mo comes up, they read his bio. Krusty the Clown is hosting, and he says He's into women who take off their clothes for money, and instead of stopping to get bids, Mo just keeps walking to the rejection section where Hans Moleman, comic book guy, Kirk Van Housen, the sea captain, and others are waiting there. And then these firemen are just like standing there; they're not auctioning themselves off. But I love Mo. I think he has such a true heart, and he's funny, cantankerous. But what do you guys think of him?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say he's the most relatable character as you're an adult. He's one of the most, and yeah, he makes people feel good because they go to him to drink beer. Or drink alcohol. I think of every time I think of Mo, I always think of the Flamin' Mo's episode where he steals Homer's drink and he's offered $1 million and he rejects it at first, and before he can accept the offer, Homer on the rooftop, he screams out it's cough syrup, children's cough syrup. That's the secret ingredient. He's a very good character, kind of a sad character, and as a kid you're watching and you don't quite get it. As you get older, I mean, you can kind of see where he's coming from. Single dude, sad dude, works behind a bar. That's kind of his livelihood. He's not good with women. He's a sad character, but he's a very, very good character, very well-rounded character. They've done a really great job of making him well-rounded and making him I know he has like an attachment to Maggie. I know she saves him in a certain spot. So I really do like this pick as far as the secondary character. But I mean, it's one of those characters where when he shows up in the scene, you don't get excited. Like if you see Professor Frink or you see comic book guy, I think you get excited when he comes in because there's going to be a funny line, or they're going to say something funny or comical, or they're going to do something funny. So you kind of get excited when you see Mo in the background coming up. You don't quite get excited to see him or to hear what he has to say. He may say something very interesting or something thoughtful or something sweet or something funny, but you're not quite as excited as, say when Itchy and Scratchy come on, you're excited to see what kind of crazy murderous thing that they're going to do. So that's my only knock on him. What do y'all think?
I like Mo. I remember being as a kid, I never really thought much about him until that one episode where he gets a face job and then he starts acting again. It's in a later season. I don't remember what season it is, but he sees himself as handsome again, right? Because he sees his picture on the Duff calendar because it's covered by all these stickers, and he finally takes it off and he's like, oh God, is this what I look like? I'm hideous. So he goes under the knife. And that's when I really felt for him. I was like, Mo is a good guy. He's flawed. Yeah. And he's sad and he does his best to he's there. He's like, oh, you're a horrible person. He's whatever, right? To Barney and all of them. He loves Barney, but at the same time, if he doesn't have money, he's going to kick him out because he's a man that runs a business and he can't just be having Barney around, drinking his hooch without paying for it. But at the end of the day, Barney's still his best friend, right? Or his friend. And watching that episode as a kid, I was like, poor Mo, Mo's such a good guy. Why would anybody treat him so horribly? This is terrible. So after that, I had a better appreciation for Mo. But I do remember that episode with Maggie. I was really confused. I was like, how did this happen? And then she ends up following the mob. I don't know, it's the whole thing. But it was a good episode. And I watching him fawn over Marge and Marge being just kind of oh, hi Mo, and he's just all panicked whenever Homer's around, that cracks me up as well. But yeah, he's the dude that they go to for those dizzying highs, right? Just kind of chilling and drinking and oh, woe is me kind of stuff. I really appreciate that. And I can relate to Mo sometimes. And it's kind of my friends are idiots, but I'm there for them anyway. Here, have a drink. We'll talk about it. We'll figure it out. Keep going, kind of thing. So I like Mo. Mo's a good guy. When
we watched him when we were younger, he was funny. It was funny to us to see Bart call and crank call him to say these things, say these different names, Mike Roch and things like that. It was funny to us as kids to see Bart do this because we loved Bart. We were like, oh, Bart's the funniest, blah, 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 blah. And we laughed at that. And it's an interesting pick, Randy. I will say that. Another character by Hank Azaria. Because now when we're older, we look at him and it's oh my God, he's so you kind of feel bad for him, even though okay, so he owns a bar, he owns his own business, he makes other people happy, he's loyal to his friends, and like Jiovanna said, hey, but he runs a business too, so I never really looked at it like that way. It kind of, Barney is probably his best friend because Barney's supposed to be Homer's best friend, but Barney's always there. So he's always there to talk to him or to be talked to, however you want to look at it. and he's probably the most recognizable because of, as far as secondary characters, he probably makes the most appearances, maybe, because they're always kind of find, maybe they're at least early.
Homer's always drinking beer.
Yeah, Homer was always drinking beer. I don't know if it's like that now, but Homer was always at the bar. Homer would always end up at Moe's. We're gonna go to Moe's. So it was always at Moe's. So of course, Moe came out on the show a lot, and it's an interesting thing. He loses his, cool a lot when he's made the joke. He's very tender as well, and the little things about him, it's just a weird, like, I think there's so much, and as far as I know, like, I get this like vibe, like, and I'm sure it's been said before, like, he's, because yes, he's got that mafia tendency, that mob boss type shit thing about him. I feel like he's so much more than what they show on the show, like, and I hope that one day it's like revealed that he's this hired killer for the mob who just wanted to get away, who was done with it, who was tired, but it didn't work out for him, so this is where he's at. He trying to leave them, but he still shows those tendencies. So like, but I don't know, there's this whole thing with him. Like, I think they can run so many directions with his character, and he does get screen time, so he's probably, like I said, one of the more recognizable ones. It's just, and I don't know if they do it anymore, but I do like look at it now and think like, oh man, this guy like couldn't catch a break as well. Very, him and Krusty, two different people as far as two different circumstances as characters that can't catch breaks. Great character. I think there's a lot of depth to this character that we don't even really understand.
We forgot to mention he was a former boxer. Kid Gorgeous to Kid Presentable to just Kid Mo. There's one thing I do want to say. Everybody here mentioned his relationship to Barney. I think my favorite Mo Barney scene is when they have the brothel in town and all the wives are getting disappointed and upset. Like, oh, Clancy, when Chief Wiggum walks in and everybody's and then when Barney walks into the brothel, nobody says anything and the camera goes to Mo and he shifts his eyes. He's like,
Barney.
Barney. Like he's disappointed in Barney. I mean, to me, that's a great. That was a great joke.
That's the one too where
Bart was a checkout guy.
Yeah, where his grandpa walks in, puts coat down, sees him, walks in. Hilarious. Like, walk back out.
Bart. Yeah. Does your father know you work here? It was his idea. Well, in that case, I'll have a whiskey sour. Yeah, that's Bart After Dark. That's one of my top picks. All right, I know that one.
That's a great episode.
Yeah.
So, guys, we talked a little bit about Bart at the end here. The most important decision, in my opinion, that The Simpsons ever made in its early years was to rebrand itself out of being a show about Bart into a show about being about Homer. Because you notice there's a trend here. All the selections we made were all the adult actors or all the adult characters. Nobody mentioned Milhouse. Nobody mentioned Martin. Nobody mentioned the bullies. But why is that? Why do you all agree with the most important decision being that the focal point was Homer and his world rather than Bart?
It's a better show when it's not so focused on just the family, because I think that can get at some point a little boring, and that's why this show has some of the best secondary characters who are and most memorable secondary characters. They're what kept the show going, what gives it its pizzazz or whatever you want to call it. And why this show is so loved, because of these other characters that move the story forward.
I think like watching I will admit I never watched him on the Tracy Ullman show. I was born in 85, right? Tracy Ullman started in 87?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they were shorts. They began as shorts on the Tracy Ullman show. Yeah, crudely drawn. Yeah.
Yes, but like when you watch season 1, it's still very much about family. The branding, like you said, was like the whole Butterfinger BBs and like Butterfinger commercials and stuff. All that was aimed at kids because it's candy, right? But I never really saw it as a show about Bart. I know, like looking back, like through all the seasons, it's a show about family, and it focuses on the family. And the main guy, because it's again like a satire or a caricature of the American family, it's going to focus on the dad. And I think there's like a moment where there's an episode where Lisa's complaining about how she's just a kid, how it sucks being a kid because nobody listens to her. And Grandpa Simpson's like, it sucks being old because nobody listens to you. And Homer's like, I'm a white male at ages like 29 to 35. Like everybody listens to me kind of, thing. And that's still the norm, right? Like that was in the 90s and that's still the norm. So I think it's always been like Homer centric. It was just like certain branding for our age group at certain times was aimed at us with Bart, but I don't think it was ever tried to make I don't think they ever made the show just focused on Bart or Bart centric. It was, and I think it makes sense that as we've grown, like their original audience, right? We're part of the original audience. They've tried to keep their original audience coming back. So us growing with them, even if the Simpsons never age, we're aging, so where they're trying to keep us along with them. And I think that's maybe where we see the shift in that, like, I don't really partake in Butterfinger BBs anymore, so I don't even know if Bart is even still spokesperson for Butterfingers. But as a kid, I would eat them because Bart Simpson would eat them, And then as I got older, I was like, I'm gonna have my first beer like Homer. I'm having my first beer in high school, and it's not before the SATs, so I'm not gonna screw up my life like he got Barney to screw up his.
You make me feel like dancing. Yeah.
Yes. But you know what I mean? Like, I think it's just our perception of it has changed a little bit. Like, yeah, I had a Bartman t-shirt growing up that I got at the Pulga, or at the flea market, but I also had like Homer Simpson shirts growing up as well. So I think it just depends on us and as we're growing through it personally.
Homer's just the main character. As kids, you think he's hilarious. As adults, you think he's hilarious. So it doesn't surprise me that this show, it does focus in on family, like Jiovanna said, but a lot of the storylines have him as the main focus because he's the funniest character. I don't know if they just went away from Bart, but I think that it was a smart move with really showcasing Homer and all his crazy antics and everything, because he really is the funniest character, and he brings everybody together. I'm just glad that they didn't make Marge the main focus, because I think she's the least. I don't know if it's an episode about Marge, I'm probably not going to watch it.
Her sisters are funnier.
Yeah. Her sisters are hilarious. Yes, I love the sisters.
I found it funny when she did. Who was it? Artie Ziff? Was it John Lovitz? Yeah, those were great episodes. And I think another thing they did was change Homer's voice. Before he talked like Walter Matthau, and then they changed him to this goofy sort of lower raised his cadence or whatever.
They made fun of that in that one episode, Police Cop, where the main guy was called Homer Simpson, and he was like the suave in the pilot episode. He was like the suave, super smart, awesome guy, and Homer was like super proud of that. And then in like the following episode, he had like a dunce cap on, or was it like a cap with like the
propeller
fan on top? Yeah, the propeller on top, and he was just like a complete oaf, like the actual Homer Simpson. And that's when he changed his name to Max Power, and it was a name you'd like to touch, but you shouldn't touch. And yeah,
SpaghettiOs. Yeah, I remember that. So
yes.
About 30 seconds each. Last thoughts on The Simpsons. We'll end with you, Giovanna, just because since you're our guest. Joseph, last thoughts on The Simpsons, what it's meant to you.
If this show didn't exist, I wouldn't have Family Guy, and I love to watch Family Guy, and I still love to watch Family Guy to this day. So I'm appreciative, but just by that alone.
What about you, Bob?
It's a great topic. I'm glad we finally came around to it. It's a show about pop culture. And, arguing the best and a lot of times the worst of TV shows, movies, music, and et cetera. So I'm glad we finally got around to The Simpsons, because it was a big part of our childhood and growing up. And like I said at the beginning, we got a lot of our pop culture references and stuff from the actual Simpsons. So I'm really happy that we kind of, finally made our way back around to talking The Simpsons.
The Simpsons for me is pure nostalgia. It'll never go away. I went to a conference in Phoenix a few years ago. We went to one of these old video
30 seconds.
We went to one of these old video game places, and where we had a drink. The first video game we played was a Simpsons game, and we stuck to that game the whole time. You remember how fun that Simpsons video game was?
Yeah,
the music, the identity, just the zeitgeist, the jokes, the genesis of it from the beginning to now being so relevant. It's probably arguably the greatest show ever, because it's lasted forever, and I think it'll last for a long time longer. Giovanna, you get to wrap us up. What do you got to say?
I just love it. It's one of my go-tos whenever I need like my comfort show. And I do have my favorite episodes, but I have watched like when they did the marathon. I watched a whole bunch of episodes then. Like I had the TV on and I was just watching them, and like some of them, like I'd catch myself like cracking up. I'm like, what season is this? What episode is this? Like, this is incredible. I need to come back to this at some point. So I do find myself going back every once in a while, but I'm happy in my little, I've dug myself a happy little rut in my season 1 through 9, to paraphrase Marge, and I'm good there. And I will always stand The Simpsons. So
Do you ever make your boyfriend wear the Mr. Plow jacket? Just
only sometimes when I'm really feeling it, like only sometimes. I even had him learn the song. So yeah, we're all about it.
Jiovanna, you've been a great guest. Where can our listeners find you?
Right now on Instagram at Gio Writes Stories. I'm there if you need anything, any help with copywriting, proofreading, all that fun stuff. I can help you with that.
We know there are a lot of Simpsons podcasts that follow us, and we follow them. If you ever need a great guest, if you ever need a guest that could talk about The Simpsons and who has a deep knowledge base, this is only the tip of the iceberg on this show, because she can talk about it for a long time, and she's absolutely the biggest fan I know and one of the best friends that I had a pleasure meeting when I was at that horrible job. Anyway, but thank you so much, Jiovanna, Bob, and
Thank
Joseph.
you for having me.
Of course, and we'd like to have you back in the future as well. And that's our show, everyone. Listeners, we'd like to hear from you. Hit us up and let us know what your favorite secondary Simpsons character is, or who your favorite secondary Simpsons character is. Most importantly, let us know what you think about the show. You may reach us at formidableopponents@gmail.com and follow us on all forms of social media by searching for Formidable Opponents. We want to thank Creative Little Pill for her great artwork. Please follow her on Instagram at Creative Little Pill. Please rate and review us on Apple and Spotify. And join us next episode. We'll be back next week with best song from a movie soundtrack. I'll have to confirm that. Anyway, for Bob, Jiovanna, and Joseph, thank y'all so much. We'll see y'all next week.
You suck diddly-uck, Randy.
They're going to say lamest show ever.
Bye, everybody.
Fare thee well.